Hello and welcome back, all 5 of you. My name is Pilot Merchant, and considering the fact that October is right around the corner, I feel like it's a proper right time to start talking about monsters. Ghosts, ghouls, goblins, Ronald McDonald, all things that petrified me whenever I was a child. There were often times where I would have nightmares about these horrible sights, but over time I was able to figure out how to lucid dream, and I was able to chase down the monsters and unmask them to show who they really were to the world. You know, that actually sounds like that'd be a pretty interesting TV show. Oh, it's already a TV show. Now, usually this is the point of the video where I try to introduce you, the viewer, to the media that we're covering in the video, but come on, who hasn't heard of freaking Scooby Doo by now? Scooby Doo is an originally animated series from 1969 that was made by Hanna-Barbera Productions that follows a group of sometimes teenagers, sometimes adults, sometimes children, and their pet dog as they go around unmasking bad guys and solving mystery after mystery. For the last 5 decades, Scooby Doo has had so many different types of media put out about it. Movies, TV shows, video games, comic books, live action productions. Just like our good friend Dick Tracy, Scooby Doo and Mystery Incorporated has been keeping rather busy over the years. And even though there are so many different brilliant movies that follow Scooby Doo and his friends, I feel like the most fun to focus on would be Scooby Doo from 2002 and Scooby Doo 2 from 2004 or 2005, I don't know. And considering the fact that I only do 1 movie per episode of this movie review thing I do on my channel, you have to come back in 2 weeks to watch Scooby Doo Part 2. That's right, baby, it's my first Part 1, Part 2. Hate me. Without any further ado though, let's go ahead and get ready to solve the mystery in Scooby Doo 2002. The movie opens up on an early 2000s sounding cover of the Scooby Doo intro while Daphne is being tossed about by a ghost ghoul guy.
Ghost keeps grabbing. Ah!
Grabbing your what, Daphne? Do continue your sentence. While the ghost grabs Daphne's who knows what, Velma is standing on top of a bridge telling Fred to get ready with his part of the plan, but Freddy Boy is a bit preoccupied by playing with his hose while staring at himself. Unlike Fred, Shaggy and Scooby are all set for their part of the plan, which is jump scaring the ghost, but it doesn't really go well because the ghost spots them and lights Scooby's tail on fire. Shaggy then starts yelling at Scooby for ruining their part of the plan, but quickly realizes that the ghost is right behind him, and so they end up running straight into Fred, who then knocks over Velma, which causes Velma to definitely dislocate her leg. Shag and Scoob then do some sick skateboard tricks, then accidentally stop the bad guy by grabbing onto a hook and knocking straight into the ghost. The mystery machine then busts into the warehouse and some blonde lady gets out of the van while an army of fans run up to the gang. Fred starts to get interviewed for the solved crime and he takes credit for Velma's plan, which upsets Velms, but her plan sucked and didn't work, so Velma, why are you getting upset with him? They unmask the baddie who turns out to be some janitor for the factory, and then we're shown how he did a float, which, not gonna lie, it's pretty darn impressive. The gang then go outside and Velma starts complaining about Fred taking credit for her flop of a plan. This then causes most of the gang to start arguing with each other about how important they are to the group and what they want and all that, and eventually Shaggy and Scooby step in to try to fix things, but the rest of the gang decides to quit because they're all selfish assholes who want to be the star. 2 years later, Shaggy and Scooby are making burgers in the van when they get a knock on the door from somebody. They try to lay low like they aren't there, but inevitably go outside to see who it is. Before the dude is even able to start talking though, Shaggy explains to the guy that him and Scooby don't solve mysteries anymore. The dude then explains to them that he's actually just there to invite them to a free getaway trip to an island, though they really don't seem interested until they're offered
all you can eat.
All you can eat?
We then skip ahead to the airport where we see Fred is walking to his terminal. All of a sudden, Velma pops out of nowhere, and then Daphne, and then the 3 start fighting all over again until Shaggy and Scooby pop out of nowhere and get the group to stop being dicks. Oh, also, I should probably mention that Scooby is dressed like an old lady so he can sneak onto the plane without going into a cage. They eventually all agree to travel to the island and then board the plane where everyone is acting a lot more like it's a school bus than, you know, an aeroplane. Oh, also we're introduced to Shaggy's love interest of the movie who, believe it or not, also eats Scooby snacks.
Boy, oh boy. Those sure do look like Scooby snacks.
I know they're for dogs. They're 100% vegetarian, and I love them.
Like me too.
How romantic. After Scooby punches Fred in the face, we arrive at Spooky Island and the gang gets greeted by a weird robot thing that's being controlled by Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean then explains to the gang why he invited them to the theme park island place and tells them about how he believes that there's been a curse put on its island to cause hordes of college kids to become mindless zombie drones for some bad guy character. The gang think that the Bean is overreacting until they watch some dude walk up to his friend, and while he's trying to get her to recognize him, she freaking body slams him.
Carol, it's me. It's Brad.
My son!
Carol, what are you doing?
Poor Brad. The gang then decide that they still don't want to work together as a team and start debating over which one of them is going to solve the mystery first, though Mr. Bean is just happy about them taking this mystery seriously and decides to throw a party for them that is hosted by tall Rey Mysterio and Quan Chi from Mortal Kombat. Velma then shows why she's a party pooper, and then we get to see the after party portion of the whole weird show thing. Shaggy gets distracted with his girl fling, and Scooby is called over to the bar because someone placed a phone call to him. The person on the other side of the phone offers Scoob some hamburgers if he agrees to go into the darkest part of the woods alone, and Scooby, in his infinite wisdom, says,
Okay.
then heads into the woods by himself while Shaggy romances his lady friend. Meanwhile, Daphne is off trying to investigate the mystery of the island and stumbles upon some weird dude trying to do a voodoo ritual with a dead chicken. She then starts to ask him some questions, and the dude said that he wants no part of the mystery, and then tells Daphne to definitely not ever go into the castle place that's on the hill because it's evil. We then get to check up on Scooby to see how he's doing on his hamburger hunt. Scoobs eventually finds a sack pinned against a tree, and assuming that his hamburgers are in there, he goes to check the bag and ends up getting jumped by a demon dog. After a failed attempt to hide from the monster, Scoob runs back to Shaggy in an effort to find protection from his forest friend, but when they start watching for a monster to come out, all that does is this dude in a weird bunny costume. Daphne then comes out of nowhere and tells the boys that she needs their help with the castle crawl. Once they actually get to the castle though, Shaggy and Scooby absolutely refuse to go inside the castle because of all of the horrible experiences they've had going into them before. Well, that is before Daphne pulls out some Scooby snacks and offers them up to the boys, after which they willingly oblige to the investigation. Heading onward into the castle, the trio starts to look around until both Fred and Velma show up out of nowhere and start to try to scare each other off. Eventually they agree to work together, and Fred starts grouping everyone off like he usually does, but Velma challenges the notion and asks to be placed with Fred instead of going off alone for once. Fred obliges and sends Daphne, Shaggy and Scooby to do what they all do best, while him and Velma look around the castle for clues. Shaggy and Scooby go off to find a dining room full of food, Daphne heads over to the entrance of the ride, and Velma and Fred walk down a long corridor having a wholesome conversation.
Dorky chicks like you turn me on too.
This is a kids movie. Rated PG. While Daphne is still trying to get the door open, some Oompa Loompa looking dude goes to turn on the power to the ride, which then causes absolute chaos to ensue. Daphne gets picked up by the ride, Shag and Scoob get attacked by their food, and Fred and Velma have to dodge some knight armor dudes swinging their axes. Eventually, Fred and Velma do find their way into the area where the Oompa Loompa turned on the power. I said they found it. Not that they got there safely.
Reminds me of the time we tried to eat the guy in the hot dog costume.
Excuse me, you did what, Shaggy? The group then all continue their investigation, and Fred and Velma end up finding some weird initiation video that gets interrupted by the Oompa Loompa hitting a security alarm, which then summons an entire squad of dudes led by Rey Mysterio into the castle. In an attempt to hide from the guards, the gang all pose as middle-aged character statues, and somehow that actually works. They then go off to update Mr. Bean about their research and tell him about the 3 suspects for who could be causing the havoc at the park. While Velma inspects this weird thing Daphne found in the castle, Velma has some weird flashback about the gang throwing Scrappy Doo, Scooby Doo's nephew, out of a van on one of their adventures, and then a group of monsters all of a sudden break into the hotel lobby and start abducting people. Shaggy, his girlfriend Daphne, and Scooby eventually make it outside safely because... yeah, something tells me that's not how those actually work. The group then watch from afar as all the monsters drag their abducted people, including Fred and Velma, into this weird cave. Mary Jane, Shaggy's girl, decides to phone the Coast Guard in an attempt to get some help, which when she phones them, the Coast Guard proceed to act creepy and evil laughs, but I'm pretty darn sure that they aren't evil, so I don't really understand why it's happening. The next day, they all wake up to an absolutely brand new spooky island resort that looks like nothing has happened to it. Being extremely confused, they all go off to investigate, and eventually Shaggy and Scooby run into Fred, who is now talking like this.
What up, dog? And dog?
Fred tells Shaggy and Scooby that they should turn into soulless monster people because it's a pretty lit thing to do, but when they say no, Fred and his friends start to breathe on them. Daphne then has a quick scene where Rey Mysterio steals a pyramid thing back from her and kidnaps her, and then Shag and Scoob lock themselves in a wooden shed barn thing. Thinking there's no way out, Shaggy starts to freak out, but luckily for them, Scooby finds some ATVs for them to steal. The two of them then take off through the door somehow, getting air when there was no ramp, and then head off to nowhere. After picking up Mary Jane on the way, the trio reach some weird metal cave entrance thing when Shaggy and Scooby start to argue because Scoob thinks that Mary Jane is a man in a mask because this happened seconds earlier. Arguing turns into fighting, and fighting turns into Scooby Doo falling into a pit trap and Shaggy going after him to save his friend. Shaggy somehow lands without breaking his neck and then goes off to save Scoob despite the fact that they just tried to fight. While looking around the creepy cabin, Shaggy finds this weird pot full of everyone's souls, and after conversing with his soul friends and sending them back to their bodies...
Get your hands off me. Daphne? he planned this somehow.
Close enough. They play a game of soul roulette until they get back into their original bodies and then go off to find the creepy cult of demon dudes. Speaking of which, it turns out that the reason that Mr. Bean invited Scooby and his friends to the island was because he needs Scooby for a sacrificial ritual that will make Mr. Bean all-powerful. Mr. Bean then tries to convince Scooby to go along with this, which honestly you'd think it'd be harder to do, but Scoob doesn't really understand the full scope of the English language, so he's just happy to feel included. We then get a montage of Mystery Inc. setting up a plan to take on the monsters, but the plan pretty much falls through immediately because Shaggy accidentally hooks his zip line up to the vat and he gets launched into the air, then knocks out this dude. Having to make do with what he's got though, Shaggy plays it out and pulls an Agent 47 by dressing in the guy's outfit. Meanwhile, Fred and Velma are trying their best to fit in at the dance party downstairs, but eventually get found out and taken into custody. Shaggy manages to sneak his way into carrying Scooby-Doo over to the sacrificial area, and while on their way there, he explains to Scoob what the concept of being a sacrifice really is, and he immediately does not want to be one anymore. But before he has a chance to take off, the bad guys extract his soul and start to place it into the pyramid thing along with all the other souls, but before they can actually get Scooby-Doo's soul in there, Shaggy does some gymnastics and knocks Mr. Bean off the ledge. It's then revealed that Mr. Bean was actually just a robot body for Scrappy-Doo to control as he went through the process of executing his evil plan. Scrappy then shows us that he's been using roids and begins to go on a rampage in an attempt to capture Scooby's soul. While that's all going on, Daphne makes her way to the surface and tries to get the hatch open that will help pour sunlight into the cabin, but while doing so, she gets jumped by Rey Mysterio and a fight breaks out. Daphne does eventually defeat Rey by tossing him through the wooden hatch, which then causes sunlight to enter the cabin, as well as Rey's body falling right into the vat full of souls, and thus returning everyone's soul to their bodies and taking out all of the ugly monster things at the same time. Shaggy then uses the pincer to remove the pyramid thing from Scrappy's chest, thus ending his rage. Everyone then starts to celebrate, and also it turns out that the real Mr. Bean was kidnapped by Scrappy and put into this whole thing in the cabin. The next day, the Coast Guard finally turned up and proved that they're not actually evil, thus making the scene from before even more confusing. Scrappy gets arrested and taken away, Mr. Bean profusely thanks the crew once again, and the movie ends on Shaggy and Scooby eating some very hot peppers. It's not exactly a perfect ending, but I'll allow it. Honestly, this film was really great. It was funny, the main characters are charming, everyone fits the role rather nicely, and honestly, I was entertained for a majority of the film. There are parts here and there where it's a bit boring or it drags on or there's an inconsistency with the timing or the way that monsters work, but it's nothing that I really can't look past. The audio quality was nice, it had a nice atmosphere all around, it felt like a nice fun kids film. The CGI was only absolutely terrible when it was supposed to be, like with the demon dogs. Although I have named quite a few positives, don't forget, there are always negatives. My biggest pet peeve for the movie is that even though it's rated PG and it's targeted for kids, the adult humor that's put into the film for, you know, the adults that are forced into the theater to watch it is a bit on the nose. A good example of this would be whenever Fred says that nerdy chicks turn him on. Yeah, that's not exactly kid-friendly. And there's quite a few jokes in the movie about that. I touched on one a little bit at the beginning whenever Daphne was saying that the ghost is grabbing her. You know, it doesn't finish the sentence, but come on. Fred saying that isn't necessary, it's not funny, it's not character building, it's not anything. I understand that the point of him saying something like that is supposed to show that he truly does not grasp how useless Velma feels as a team member in that moment and tries to console her in that way, but I think it would be better played out if Velma were to come up with a plan and then Fred say that's an absolutely horrible plan, and then maybe like 5-10 minutes later, he says that he came up with the plan, it's the exact same plan that Velma had. That would show how, in a funny way, and in a kid-appropriate way, how she's undermined and is not truly valued as a team member. I think that would probably be a better situation for a movie like this. Little things like the lighting not looking completely good in dark scenes, the animation not looking good whenever they're grabbing people, or somehow Daphne's actress ends up being in the same pose, in the same frame, in the same spots several times throughout the movie. Like, that's really weird. Please stop doing that. But honestly, things like that don't really bother me, but they do need to be taken into consideration whenever actually evaluating a movie. Overall, I'd say that the rewatchability of this film is a 4.5 out of 5, essentially meaning that if I was at your house and I was not drunk and you turned this movie on, I'd probably sit down to watch it for a bit. But that's going to be all from me today. Until the next 2 weeks comes and you get to come back here for Scooby Doo Part 2. In the meantime though, if you like this video, then like this video. You have any movies that you want me to review for you, just leave it down in the comments and I will get back to you. And if you want to see more movie reviews from me, including Part 2 of Scooby Doo, then make sure that you subscribe because I do upload content like this every 2 weeks. So, you know, I'm keeping up. Other than that though, that's gonna be it from me. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a lovely day. I'm rather nervous about Part 2, I'm not used to doing these.